Welcome back, traders and investors, to Benzinga's Pre-Market Prep, brought to you by MarketFi. I'm your co-host, Joel Alcana, along with Brianna Velasky. We have Scott Redler on the line. He's Chief Strategist at T3 Live and T3 Trading Group. Scott, how you doing on this Monday morning?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
We're doing good. Boy, you got me a little excited here because, we get your morning note here and you said, be ready. So what should we be ready for?
Well, it's either be ready for nothing or be ready for something. I guess the moral of the story is be ready, because the way the markets are trading, you get these misdirectional moves that happen fast. And then if you look for another move, chances are it doesn't happen until you pretty much give up on it. So my statement, be ready, is that a few things did happen last week that are, I guess, worth noting. You have the S&P breaking below 2100, which was somewhat of an upward trend type of spot. I don't think it means game over. It just means that we lost the 8 and 21 day, which is some momentum there. But like most of this year, money has gone elsewhere, and there's been other places that have been on the move. So, if the S&P stays below 2100, maybe today, tomorrow, perhaps the Bears will have a chance to break it below Friday's low of 2085. And then, from there, another reason to be ready is you want to know where, the next few support levels are. So this way, if it hits there and you're short, you can cover, because you have to cover fast these days. And if you're looking for reversal points, you need to know where they are, because that also happens fast. So if you look at the chart of the S&PX, you'll see that, so for my outline for this week is, if we stay below 2100, Bears try and keep the ball a little bit. We get back above it. We're right back in the range. If we break below 2085, you then have that, lower support pivot of 2070, and then, major going across sideways is somewhere closer to 2050. But, it's either be ready for nothing or be ready for something, and, you never know which day it happens. So you just have to kind of be on your toes.
Do you notice any kind of, different trading activity or different trading patterns, during a rollover? We'll be going to the front month contract in the S&P futures. Have you ever noticed any kind of unusual trading activity during the roll?
I'm not as specific. There are people that point that out to me, that sometimes the action on Fridays just have been pretty horrendous as it is, with option expiration and the control these dealers have. A lot of divergences happen, which takes away a lot of the edge from traders. There are some traders that are great playing the strike price game, where they think things are going to close, but then also you think something's going to close somewhere and it doesn't. You're not watching the actual price action, and then, you can get a blowout of the volatility level. So, for me, I'm aware of when that changes in the front month rolls, but I don't really change my specific habits for that. I just maybe do a little less, because things might make a little less sense to me. So that's why coming into this week also, S&P was weaker on Friday, but then you had some strength in the Russell and the bios. So I think coming in today, you want to see, does strength continue in the bios and the Russell, and does it pull the S&P up, or do we just have a divergence there? And the sectors just continue to diverge, which is what's been going on this entire year. You have these rolling corrections where you have sectors go down 8 to 15%. The S&P doesn't correct, and then you have sectors make new highs, and overall, there's not a lot of continuity.
Okay, talking about the Russell there, sitting on some support as well here. Keeping an eye on the Russell today.
Yeah, because the Russell, the IWM is closing the highs on Friday, while the S&P is very lethargic. So, to me, I'm more comfortable looking for the stronger sectors or trying to be long. So I am long the IWMs. It's been a very choppy tape, and by no means has there been like a ton of momentum there. But I figured, if we're going to continue and have a decent week, this is in the game at least for some higher prices. 123.50. It's been better to buy into the support versus adding on strength. So at this point, I'm going to try and sit in some. But if it were to take out 125.50, 126, I think some people would start chirping all over the media that, oh, look at the Russell, it's looking good. And the same thing with the bios. The bios, which is probably one of the most talked about sectors this year, it's giving you a lot of good two-way trades. Don't get me wrong, and there's been times to be short when it moves quick and times to be long. Right now, this chart looks more constructive. You look at the IBBs, you have 360s major support. It's been a lot of back and forth, but sometimes momentum comes, it happens quick, so you need to be ready. So for me, I'm long some of the IBBs, and if maybe some strength comes to the Russell, we'll need some some leadership friends. And the bio seems like if the IBB gets above 367.50, and you were short this ETF, I would think that some cover, and then all of a sudden the next level is at 374 high from early March. So I think the bears gonna have a hard time getting downside follow through in the S&P if the strength continues in the Russell and the bios and maybe even some of the banks.
Okay, coming out of the chat here, John Vitale wants your take on a couple stocks here, and we got to talk about Apple, right? The developers conference going on here. It's been kind of quiet lately. Back under 130. What's your take on Apple?
I'm not in Apple right now, but I'm going to watch it. There is obviously a big event today, and they tend to try and sell Apple on the event, because but usually the events are up on a high pedestal. This one seems a little different, considering that there's going to be no Apple Home stuff spoken about, or Apple Car, or Apple TV. They're going to be rolling out the music, which is highly telegraphed. So I think expectations for this one is low. So we'll see how it reacts. You have the 50-day right underneath, which it doesn't like to be below, and the 50-day is 127.91. So if it breaks Friday's low of 128.36, touches the 50-day and bounces off that and does that RDR with authority into the afternoon, maybe it's worth a look. But it's been a very sluggish stock recently, and I've tried to be long it a few times, and even when the market's been strong, it's been a little lethargic. So typically Apple's best when it leads the tape, not when the tape goes and it gets dragged up, and then as soon as we get a sell program, it's the first to go down. So we'll see if that changes today. But I'm going to try and go into it with no opinions because I don't want to get stuck if my opinions are wrong.
Okay, Skyworks Solutions here made that all-time high, pulled back. Looks like it's found a nice area of support here. Is that something that you'd be leaning on here? SWKS.
My traders have talked about this one a lot. There's been a lot of movement. It's in a good trend. It's strong. I personally haven't traded it all the time, but it's up this morning, right? There's some kind of rumors takeover on it. I heard some people were mentioning it on the Twitter sphere. I didn't look at it this morning, but this stock has been up, a performer above the 21 day. It's better to be long than shorted. Can you tell me, Joel, where it is right now?
Yeah, just traded 106.10. That's up 36 cents. Right at Friday's high here. Friday's high was 106.09. So, looking on my feed here, that was on Friday. There was circulated unconfirmed rumors of a Skyworks takeover, rumored price at 130, but no believers out here, but is trading at yesterday's high 106.10.
All right, so if the futures are down and there's talk of a deal, usually if there's no deal Monday morning, it gives back a lot of what it had the prior session. So maybe there is some believers that still might be out there, and you never want to be long the stock purely for takeover speculation. But the stock's been in a strong trend for most of the year without any of that talk. And the last breakout happened early May when it cleared this 100, and it pulled back, and at this point, there's no real clear-cut buy, but it's a nice strong trend. I would say you could probably be long it, and I would think that you could put your stop in at like somewhere around 102.
Okay, Facebook here. Any comments on that? Good couple days back up in the 80 handle here. Looks like we found a little resistance up at 83. Kind of tight range on Friday. What's your take on Facebook?
I think Facebook's back in the game. I know, I started getting active again in it when you had that big wide range bar back on May 14th. You look at the size of that. Then it got a little choppy. And then last week was good to see in the market. You finally had like 2 days in a row. You don't get 2 days in a row in a while. And, on early last week, you had Facebook wake up. I remember being long it. And then it cleared 81, and you actually could have bought a little strength, last week. And now it's flagging. So I would say if Facebook could hold 81, I'm long a little bit. If it gets above 82.50, maybe it can continue. You saw some signs of life in LinkedIn. It also had a day one when it cleared 191 a few sessions before the upgrade that took it back into the earnings gap. Now I'd like to see LinkedIn, flag a little bit. It's on my radar this week. If LinkedIn can stay above, say, 210, maybe there's another trade there after a little digestion above 217 because that gap goes all the way up to 245 to 250 ish. So I think social got a little bit a little better action at least. Twitter can't hold a rally yet, but I think that's getting tight too, so it's on the radar. But it really probably has to clear like 37.50 and actually hold on to it into the close with volume. But ultimately, it looks like Facebook is the one that people gravitate towards, and if any of them could make new highs this year, I think Facebook would be the one.
Looking at the financials here, Dennis, has just been noted the strength on that on Friday really kept the market from going in the tank. Huge in buying balances today. I don't know if they've been offset. Is the financials? Bank America had a big move on Friday. You dabbling in the financials at all?
I've been trading them the past few weeks. I've been long Citigroup a few different times, Morgan Stanley a few different times. Goldman's been leading the way. I'm not long the financials coming into today. I did think, sometimes you get like an event, the jobs report. You had, what's it called? The strength there as far as like the growth story. So people just went right to the banks, and it felt like that was some shorts capitulating or whatnot. I do think that the trend's going to stay strong there, and you could buy, as long as they stay above the 8 and 21 days, stay with them. There's no like real setup I love. It's tight. Like I love Citigroup when it crossed and broke above 54. I love Goldman Sachs when it crossed and took out that 201.50. Even Bank of America gave you some tradable pivots. Right now, if you're in them, trail them. But as far as like a tight pattern, those were like a few weeks back. Now they're just trending.
Cybersecurity names have been very strong, and I know you've been a fan of FireEye's, one of your focus names here. Are more continued rally or looking a little extended here in FireEye?
Well, FireEye and CYBR were my two major cybersecurity names for my 2015 note, and they gave you a great move up the beginning of the year, and then they consolidated again. And I think last time we spoke, the viable pivot in FireEye to me was around 45.50 or 46, and now it's trading into the 50s. You had a strong day Friday, so if you wanted to trade it, that would have been the day to be long, as it showed relative strength. And today it's up pre-market. I'd be trimming it today. I wouldn't start a new position here on this day in FireEye because it is extended from the 8-day, which is like a 48. Cyber, though, has lagged a little bit. It had to absorb a big secondary. You had your day one breakout on Friday. This still, to me, has a tradable tight pattern where it doesn't look extended, where the next level is around 69, and then you have the high that was put in February. So this one I think is up, and there could be more room before it gets extended. But both of them have been, rewarding traders who learned how to trade them, who've been trading them with patterns, have been buying the dip. Even those who just have been sitting in hack, which is the ETF for the cybersecurity names, is at all-time high. So it shows you that there are sectors that show relative performance, and that if you key there because you like to buy strength or you look for momentum, this has been a spot for it. But your pricing and timing has to be what's comfortable for you, and you want to also make sure the setup is conducive to your style. And right now, it's like Cyber is the one that could be more of a focus this week, where FireEye should have been the week prior.
Okay, Chinese names on the move Friday. Alibaba here sitting above the $90 level, couple lows in the 89s here. What's your take on Alibaba?
I know a lot of traders that were just keying on Alibaba on Friday were definitely a little disappointed because it didn't really have much movement, and some of the other Chinese names were going crazy. I do think traders will, including me, up as long as it stays above 89.5, it'll be considered like a B plus play. If it can get above 91.5, which is the prior resistance from last week, maybe it gets on its way back to the highs. But really the action's been in names like, look at Sina, for instance. Sina, like, my goodness, the size of that move when it woke up above 44 to 56 was big. On Friday, you had Kihu, Kihu. Look at the size of that day one. A day one like that on volume typically puts it back in place. So maybe, you put that back on your trader radar to see if it holds, the top third of that. Look at YY, big one-day move. Big one-day moves tend to, give you more action if they digest well. So, some of these names, even JD, actually more of a leadership stock, tried to break into highs. So, some of those Chinese names, just sometimes it's the names is what people go after. Like they probably went after Baba or Baidu, but sometimes the better action are on the mid caps or the less known names. And those three names I just mentioned, you want to maybe put into your trading plan. So this way, if the commitment stays, you learn how it moves, and then the next move that happens, you're ahead of the tape versus chasing it.
Going back to this Sina, I mean, I saw the news on it. I believe that the chairman was getting very involved with an investment there. I mean, could you make heads? I mean, obviously the street loved it here, but did you think that news was that significant?
You know what? I don't. We're not analysts really, and we're not
Okay,
fundamental guys. And
okay.
you know, as far as the news came out, I looked at it. I did not trade it, but I look at other names in the groups. And if you look at that day that it happened, it's closed near the highs. It stayed strong. So right there, that told you it was significant. If the news came out and it went up that many points, and the next day gave up half, the stock would be telling you that it doesn't mean much. So that there, the action spoke for itself. And then what you want to do is you want to say, what's next? What could this do for the group? And that signing news happened well before last Friday's strength and the other names I mentioned, like YY and Kihu and JD. And so when something like that happens in one name that's kind of similar, if you short the other names, you want to make sure nothing like that could happen there. And if you like some of the patterns there, you wait for a day and be ready for when volume comes in. And volume came into all of them on Friday, and they were pretty heavy. So you want to be ready to see if that continues.
Don't care about the news. Just trade the price. Good advice there, Scott. Biotechs here in the pharma. You've had Gilead kind of leading the way up here. Any thoughts on GILD, Gilead Sciences?
This has been a leader. Okay, during this last move, I put the chart on Twitter many times when the real breakout trade was above 106. Okay, now it's been following the 8 day since, and with the strength in the bios, you want to see leadership, and this is one of them. I would say as long as it stays now maybe above 112, at some point it takes out the prior high of 116.83. There was a lot of action in a lot of the lesser known names, where I guess we were gravitating towards on Friday. Like if you look at the chart of Juno, for instance, first of all, that can crush people. That's a pure lesson in technicals right there. If you look at the chart of Juno, if you have that up, you'll see that huge wide range bar that came out on 4/20, April 20th. Pretty much broke that trend. It broke below the 8 day, it broke below the 21 day, and then it stayed below it for 5 sessions, and then you followed through to the downside. And then, if you look at 5/19, May 19th, you had a wide range bar to the upside, some inside days, and then boom. Look at that trend back to highs. I know a lot of traders that tried to buy it on the way down and got crushed, and then short this on the way up, and then it got crushed into new highs. So it shows you don't want to just you want to do a level versus a level, not just say this can't go down anymore, this can't go up anymore. But the second part of the story is you look at that, then it's like what next? Look at Kite, KITE, big wide range bar, just broke its descending channel. So if something like that could happen with Juno, people think it might happen elsewhere. So Kite is something that's now on my radar. XON, look at that, day on Friday, nice wide range bar, nice descending channel above all the moving averages. And that's now, back on the radar. And then maybe even the little guy, ZIOP, above $10. So as a trader, you want to see if this happens, if I'm not there, then what could potentially happen. And then when the market goes after what potentially could happen, you're there and you're ready for that action. And at day one with potency and volume could lead to more action if there's commitment, and you have to know how to measure that.
Some nice charts there and some great setups. Thanks a lot, Scott. Scott Redler, Chief Strategist at T3 Live and T3 Trading Group. He joins us every Monday morning. Give us his take on the market. Thanks a lot, Scott. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Have a good one.